Fiona clutched the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. The heater in her old sedan had gone out half an hour ago, and tiny puffs of warm breath escaped Faith's mouth in the back seat, fogging up the window. Outside, the Denver streets were hazy with drifting snowflakes like small shards of ice swirling under the harsh glow of the streetlights. It was nearly 9 p.m., and Fiona still had 2 more deliveries to complete for Daily Deliver, the food delivery app that had become her lifeline these last few months. She glanced at the gas gauge, a hair above empty. The neon sign of a liquor store flickered to her left, half the letters dead, reminding her how rundown parts of the city could be. "Mommy, I'm cold," Faith whimpered. She was only 3 years old, strapped into a booster seat that Fiona had bought secondhand. Her curly dark hair peeked out from under a pink beanie. Fiona forced a gentle smile into the rearview mirror. "I know, baby. We're almost done, I promise." A year ago, Fiona had been living in a small town on the outskirts of Colorado. She'd hoped for a more stable life, but single motherhood was an uphill climb. After her boyfriend Ethan had walked out the moment she'd told him she was pregnant, she'd learned to survive on her own. Still, no matter how hard she worked, she always felt like she was 3 steps behind rent and groceries. She squinted at the GPS on her phone, which had decided to freeze. The bright icon for delivery address flickered in and out of existence. Typical. Reaching for the phone, she accidentally hit the wiper fluid button, splashing more liquid across the windshield. Slushy water ran in uneven streams, half freezing on contact. Great. She fiddled with the device, but the GPS simply refused to cooperate. "Come on," she muttered, gripping the phone. Faith, picking up on her mother's frustration, looked worried. "Are we lost?" Fiona sighed. "Just a little turned around, but we'll be okay." Finally, the phone roared back to life, recalculating the route. According to the map, she'd overshot the high-end neighborhood by several blocks. She reversed into a deserted intersection and turned onto a side street lined with expensive townhouses. The place was quiet, like a ghost town wrapped in snow. Within minutes, she pulled up to the gates of a posh residential complex. Tall pine trees flanked each side of the entrance, garlanded in twinkling white lights that looked as if they belonged to an upscale Christmas card. Fiona's breath caught in her throat. Denver definitely had pockets of wealth, but she'd never expected to see something quite so fancy. The building beyond the gates soared up, edges sleek with steel and glass. "All right, Faith," Fiona said. "We're here." She found a spot to park near the entrance. The swirling snow beneath the floodlights made the entire courtyard seem dreamlike, almost too perfect for her reality. With a resigned sigh, Fiona wrapped her thin jacket tighter and stepped out to grab the bag of food in the trunk. Faith scrambled out as well, small boots crunching on fresh snowfall. Just as Fiona was about to head for the elevator, the plastic handle of the takeout bag gave way. The cardboard containers slid forward. She gasped, trying to catch them, but the slick ground made her lose her footing. In a heartbeat, the entire order scattered onto the spotless pavement. Her heart sank. She heard Faith let out a frightened squeak, and everything slowed as if she were trapped in a bad dream. The red sauce from the Chinese takeout spilled across the white snow, steam rising in the chill air. "Mommy!" Faith's eyes went wide. Fiona wanted to scream or cry, but she forced herself to remain calm. If she broke down, Faith would panic. "It's okay, baby," she managed to say, voice trembling. I'll figure it out." No sooner had she started scooping up the toppled boxes when a door slid open along the side of the building. A tall figure appeared, dark coat, sculpted features that the overhead light caught at an angle. He looked down at Fiona, eyes flicking from her face to Faith's wide, scared expression, then to the scattered food. "Are you hurt?" His voice was smooth but laced with concern. "No, I'm fine," Fiona stammered. She straightened up, ignoring the sting in her palms from the icy ground. "I'm sorry about the mess." He moved closer, the corners of his mouth drawn in a thoughtful line. "I assume you're from Daily Deliver?" "Yeah. The bag tore. I'll replace your order, sir." He glanced at the spill. Faith clung to Fiona's leg, shivering. The man's expression softened, and for a moment Fiona had the odd sense that he recognized her face. But that was impossible. They'd never met. He knelt, gently patting Faith's shoulder. Hey there, you cold? Faith nodded, tears on the brink of falling. You both should come inside. It's freezing out here. Fiona started to protest. I have other deliveries. He cut her off. It's not safe dragging a little kid out in this storm. I can call Daily Deliver to cancel your pending orders, or I can pay you for them. Either way, you need to get warm. She gaped, uncertain. He seemed genuine, but how could she know for sure? Sir, I appreciate it, but name's Andrew, he said quietly. Andrew Ford, and I'm not just a random customer. He paused, then added, I'm the co-founder of Daily Deliver. Fiona stared, heart pounding. This had to be some bizarre dream. Andrew gave her a small, almost apologetic smile. I get the feeling you don't believe me. Look, let's go into the lobby. We can talk there. I promise I won't bite. She hesitated, glancing at Faith. The child was trembling. One look at the swirling snow told Fiona she couldn't just keep standing here. With a curt nod, she stepped forward. All right, Fiona said. Just a minute. She scooped up the ruined containers and tossed them into a trash can by the door. Then, carefully, she guided Faith toward the building's gleaming double doors. Andrew held it open, ushering them into a foyer that practically radiated warmth from the golden light fixtures to the soft hum of the climate control. Faith let out a contented sigh, pressing her hands to her cheeks. Fiona couldn't help but let her eyes wander, taking in the high ceilings and sleek decor. Everything smelled of polished wood and faint cologne. Andrew turned back to Fiona. Let's get your daughter settled, he said. Then we can talk about a business proposition. Business proposition? Fiona echoed, thoroughly confused. He simply nodded, that same serious expression etched on his face. Let's call it a short-term consulting gig, for you. And in that moment, as the warmth of the foyer wrapped around her and Faith, Fiona felt the stir of both relief and panic. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she did know she couldn't face that frigid Denver night again without something changing. Inside the new Skyline Tower's posh lobby, Fiona gently guided Faith onto a cushioned bench near a massive modern fireplace that flickered behind a protective glass pane. The heat licked outward, and Faith leaned in, her little cheeks turning pink from the warmth. Andrew walked to the front desk and muttered something to a concierge who promptly nodded, picked up the phone, and began making calls. Fiona guessed he was taking care of the ruined delivery. Her chest tightened with unease she hated feeling like a charity case. A swirl of emotions rushed through her mind. Ethan's face, sneering and dismissive, crept into her memory. You'll never make it on your own. You're too soft. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing the memory away. She'd done okay so far, right? Yet here she was, half frozen, job undone, and depending on a stranger's goodwill. Andrew returned, studying Fiona's tense posture. It's all sorted. Daily Deliver is reassigning your other orders and refunding the lost one. She blinked. They can do that? I'm still a majority shareholder, he said with a trace of humor. Then his eyes flicked to Faith, who was picking at the bench's edge. Is she hungry? Fiona's stomach tensed. We already ate earlier, she lied. In truth, money was so tight that dinner had been a hastily split sandwich. Faith had gobbled most of it. Fiona had survived on coffee. Andrew gave her an unreadable look but didn't pry. You mentioned you still have bills to pay. Let me reimburse you for tonight's deliveries. He paused. And maybe we can talk about a consulting role? Consulting role? Fiona echoed skeptically, sitting up straighter. That sounds fancy. I'm just a driver. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets. You're also someone who deals with the app's real flaws every day. From route inefficiencies to tip calculations, I suspect you know more about Daily Deliver's blind spots than any corporate VP does. Fiona studied him. He was tall, early 30s maybe, with dark hair neatly trimmed. His gaze was steady. There was something about his confidence polished, sure, but it didn't scream arrogance. She'd known men like Ethan who were arrogant to the core, and this didn't feel the same. She remembered the spilled food and how gently Andrew had looked at Faith. Why me? She asked. You could talk to any driver in Denver. True, he shrugged, but I like how you handle pressure. I've seen your name come up in our system consistently high ratings from customers, always on time, even in the worst weather. A faint smile touched his lips. Tonight, that might not hold, but I can't blame you for a torn bag. Her cheeks warmed. We all do what we can. Andrew nodded, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. Right now, it's freezing. You have your daughter with you, and you're under financial stress. Yet you keep pushing forward. That says a lot about your work ethic. Fiona sighed. Look, I appreciate the compliment, but I have no idea what a consultant even does. He motioned toward a cluster of leather sofas near the fireplace. Why don't we sit? I'll explain. She nodded and settled Faith in her lap. The child yawned, eyelids drooping. Andrew sat across from them, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, his tone low and calm. I co-founded Daily Deliver 3 years ago. It started strong, but expansions and management changes have created friction. Drivers are complaining tips aren't consistent, route systems glitch, and the company's not responding fast enough. The problem is most executives never see the real struggle. They're too focused on numbers, not people. Fiona's heart fluttered. She'd complained about those very issues to her co-drivers plenty of times. Okay, so where do I come in? Andrew's gaze locked on hers. For 1 week, I want you to come into the office and share your daily realities. Everything from how you budget gas money to what it's like balancing childcare with deliveries. I'll pay you for your insights, and we'll work on solutions that make sense for real drivers. Fiona stared at him, mouth slightly open. Is he serious? And you'll pay me? He mentioned a figure that made her head spin enough to cover her back rent and maybe fix her leaky bathroom faucet. That's too much, she mumbled. Andrew shrugged. Not if it saves the company from hemorrhaging drivers. It's business sense. It took all her willpower not to break down right there. The warmth from the fireplace felt surreal. Just hours ago, she'd been braving the snowy roads, worried about feeding Faith the next day. Now this man was offering her a lifeline, a stepping stone out of the spiral she'd felt trapped in. Yet suspicion nagged her. This doesn't come with strings, does it? She asked bluntly, mind flashing back to Ethan's manipulations. I'm not obligated to do anything else, right? Andrew's expression softened, a hint of sadness flickering across his features. I'm not that kind of person, Fiona. If you find my offer shady, walk away anytime. You keep what I pay you. But I'd like you to consider it both for you and for other drivers like you. She swallowed the lump in her throat and glanced at Faith, who dozed off against her chest, cheeks rosy with exhaustion. Another shift tomorrow meant leaving Faith at a friend's place. Another night of picking up cheap microwavable dinners. Another layer of stress. Maybe, just maybe, this was the break she'd been praying for. All right, she said softly, pressing her hand to Faith's hair. I'll think about it. Andrew stood, retrieving a small notepad from his coat pocket. He scribbled something on it, tore the page off, and handed it to Fiona. My direct line. Call me tomorrow with your decision. In the meantime, how about I arrange a ride to get you home safely? She wanted to argue, to maintain her independence, but the memory of Faith's shivering in the back seat held her back. She nodded. Thank you. As she watched Andrew step aside to speak with the concierge once more, she felt that swirl of doubt and hope again. Maybe it was reckless to trust him, but she couldn't deny the sense of relief blooming in her chest. Something about Andrew's demeanor, the seriousness in his eyes, made her want to believe him. Only time would tell if that leap of faith was worth it. When Fiona woke the next morning, her cheap space heater had quit in the middle of the night. The tiny basement apartment felt like an icebox, paint peeling around the window frames. Faith was wrapped in layers of blankets on a worn-out futon. Fiona rubbed her arms, trying to shrug off the lingering cold in her muscles. Outside, the sun had barely risen, but a dull gray glow seeped through the frosted glass. Denver winter was unrelenting. She glanced at her phone, seeing a missed call from her friend Jessica, who sometimes watched Faith in emergencies. Fiona quickly texted her an apology and a promise to chat soon. Then she saw Andrew's note crumpled on the wobbly side table. Andrew Ford, 5550167. The memory of his voice, calm and confident, replayed in her head. She pulled in a shaky breath. Part of her wanted to call right away, secure that so-called consultant gig before he changed his mind. But old scars told her not to be so trusting. Faith stirred, blinking sleepily. "Mommy, can I have cereal?" Fiona mustered a smile. "Sure, honey." In the cramped kitchen corner, no real wall separated the living area from the rest. She opened the nearly empty fridge. A lone carton of milk and half a box of cereal sat on the shelf. She was grateful there was enough for Faith, at least. As Faith chomped on her breakfast, Fiona sank onto the futon next to her, phone in hand. The rental agreement was due next week, and her bank account was dangerously low. She thought of the worn-down car, the unpredictable hours. Then she thought of Andrew's direct line, the note he'd given her. "It's just 1 week," she muttered to herself. "Even if it's a trap well, I can always walk away, right?" She dialed the number, heart pounding. It rang twice before a smooth, familiar voice answered. "Andrew here." "Hi," Fiona croaked, surprised by her own nervousness. "It's Fiona from last night." There was a rustle on the other end, as if Andrew sat up straighter. "Fiona, good morning. I wasn't sure if you'd call." She forced a little laugh. "I'm not sure if I should, either." "Do you want to come by the Daily Deliver headquarters today?" he asked. "No obligations yet. Just an orientation, maybe sign a temporary contract. You can bring Faith if you need to." The mention of Faith instantly reduced her tension. He sounded genuine, acknowledging her reality. "All right," she said, voice steadier. "Where should I go?" He gave the address, which was ironically only a few blocks from the fancy neighborhood where she'd messed up the delivery. "Ask for me at the front desk. I'll make sure they let you up." She hung up feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. She had about 2 hours before she needed to be there. Enough time to dress Faith warmly and maybe make herself look semi-professional. But what does a consultant even wear? She wondered, glancing at her threadbare jeans. "Mommy, are we going somewhere?" Faith asked, tugging at Fiona's sleeve. Fiona pushed aside her worries and ruffled her daughter's hair. "Yes, baby. Somewhere new. Could be a good day." The Daily Deliver HQ was a towering complex on a busy Denver street. Snow was piled on the curbs, and the sidewalks were salted to keep them from turning to ice rinks. Fiona parked her car, her tank nearly empty again, and led Faith by the hand across the slushy pavement. In the lobby, bright lights shone down on rows of modern couches, an open-plan design that felt larger than life. A few employees in branded hoodies zipped by, coffee cups in hand, chatting about algorithms or marketing campaigns. A woman at the reception desk, wearing a neat blouse and a broad smile, greeted Fiona. "Good morning. Can I help you?" I'm here to see Andrew Ford," Fiona said, trying not to sound intimidated. She noticed Faith gawking at the glass sculptures near the elevator. The receptionist's eyes lit up. "Oh, you must be Fiona. Mr. Ford said to expect you." She handed over a temporary badge. "Take the elevator to the 12th floor. He's waiting." It all felt surreal. Fiona picked Faith up, stepping into the elevator that rose with a soft hum. The door slid open on a wide corridor with glass walls overlooking the city. Snow-capped rooftops spread below them, and further in the distance, the faint outlines of the Rocky Mountains. "Wow," Faith whispered, pressing her nose to the glass. "We're high up." Andrew appeared from a side office, a warm grin on his face. He wore a simple dark sweater and slacks, a step down from last night's formal coat. "Good to see you both. How was the drive?" Fiona shrugged. "Not too bad. Just watch out for black ice in the side streets." Andrew nodded. Then his gaze shifted to Faith. "Hi, Faith. Do you want some crayons or anything while we talk to your mom?" The little girl gave a shy smile. "Crayons." Andrew motioned to a lounge area near the reception desk on this floor. "Right there. We set up a small table with coloring books." Fiona's mouth opened in surprise. "You guys did that for her?" Andrew shrugged lightly. "We have a few employees who bring kids in occasionally. Thought it might help." They settled Faith at the small table. A couple of staff members looked on curiously, but no one said anything. Fiona noticed a man in a tailored suit standing by the large windows. He had salt and pepper hair, a stern jawline, and was tapping on a tablet. He shot them a skeptical glance, then turned back to his screen. "That's Eric," Andrew whispered, leaning closer to Fiona. "My partner in this business. He's not entirely convinced about this initiative, but we'll get there." Fiona swallowed, nerves rattling again. She forced herself to keep her chin up. Andrew led her into a conference room with a broad, glossy table and a view of Denver's skyline. Snow was drifting lazily outside, the city pulsing below. He handed her a few papers, simple bullet points about the consulting responsibilities and compensation details. Her eyes widened at the numbers, though she tried to hide her reaction. "So basically, I'll come in each day, share feedback on the driver interface and daily struggles," Fiona asked. "Yes, and any ideas you have for improvement," Andrew replied. "We'll meet with different department leads, tech, marketing, operations to see how we can fix real driver concerns." Fiona flipped through the pages. "I've never been in an office job. I might not know how to talk business." Andrew gave a small smile. "Just be honest. That's all we need." She paused, a pinch of doubt still tugging at her. But an image of her frigid apartment and the mountain of unpaid bills flashed through her mind. "All right, I'll do it, for a week." Andrew extended his hand and she shook it. His grip was firm, a subtle warmth emanating from his palm. "Welcome aboard, Fiona." Despite the swirl of anxieties about Faith, about whether this was too good to be true, Fiona felt a spark of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. That evening, Fiona carried Faith up the creaking stairs to their basement apartment, her mind still buzzing with the day's events. She'd spent hours in various brief sessions at Daily Deliver, meeting team members from different departments, some friendly, others politely distant. Everyone seemed curious about Andrew's driver consultant. Faith had colored quietly for most of it, munching on the snacks provided by a thoughtful marketing associate named Chloe. The fact that the company actually set up a little corner for children felt unbelievably considerate, or maybe just new to Fiona's eyes. Now, back in the dim glow of a single overhead bulb, the contrasts hit Fiona like a freight train. The daily hustle to stay afloat, the near-empty cupboards, and the memory of Ethan's scornful expression were starkly different from the sleek environment she'd just left. She sighed and put Faith down on the futon. "Can I watch cartoons?" Faith asked, yawning. Fiona brushed a lock of hair from the girl's forehead. "Sure, baby. Just a little bit." She flicked on their small TV, its screen fuzzy but functional. Faith settled in, content. With Faith occupied, Fiona set up her laptop on the rickety kitchen table. She opened her email. An official welcome note from Daily Deliver's HR, a schedule for the next day, and a message from Andrew titled, "Glad to have you on board." She clicked it open. "Fiona, thank you for trusting me with this opportunity. I know it must feel strange. Tomorrow we'll dive deeper into the driver feedback. Bring any notes you have, nothing's too small. Let me know if you need anything at all. Andrew." Her heart fluttered at his sincerity. She remembered how he'd glanced at Faith whenever she got fussy, offering quiet reassurance. Most people in corporate offices wouldn't bat an eye at a tired toddler. She closed the email, staring at the flickering lamp overhead. A memory popped up. How when she'd told Ethan she was pregnant, he'd practically laughed, calling her naive. "You'll never be anything more than a waitress with a kid in tow," he'd said. Look at her now. Maybe she was still struggling, but she was stepping up, making changes. Sure, she owed a lot to Andrew's unexpected kindness, but part of her insisted she was bringing her own grit to the table. A soft cry from Faith pulled Fiona back to the moment. She rushed over, realizing the little one was coughing. She'd been battling a mild cold since the weekend. Fiona gently rubbed her back, promising to make some warm tea. This cramped basement lacked decent heating, and winter's chill crept inside like an uninvited guest. She couldn't keep raising her daughter here. Not forever. Andrew's consulting offer might be the first step toward something better. Enough to move into a less claustrophobic place, maybe fix her car, or even enroll Faith in a decent daycare. As she brewed tea on the tiny stove, the battered kettle whistled like a train in the night, echoing her own mixture of anxiety and determination. She poured the liquid into a chipped mug, stirring in a bit of honey, hoping it'd soothe Faith's throat. Tomorrow she'd walk into that modern office again, surrounded by professionals who probably never worried about an empty fridge. But for Faith's sake, she'd push aside her insecurities. She'd speak up about the messy reality of driver life, Long hours, unpredictable tips, the strain of car maintenance. Something about Andrew's approach made her think he truly wanted to understand. Maybe he'd never faced the ugliness of survival mode, but at least he seemed open, ready to listen. If he could use her insight to fix the system for other struggling folks, all the better. "Mommy," Faith murmured. She peered up with groggy eyes. "Are we going to see the nice man again?" Fiona gently handed her the mug, helping her blow on the steaming tea. "Yes, baby, tomorrow." Faith took a careful sip, then leaned her head on Fiona's arm. "He gave me crayons," she said thoughtfully, as if crayons were the pinnacle of kindness. Fiona's throat tightened. Faith was so innocent, so easily pleased by a small gesture. Fiona rubbed her daughter's back. "That was kind of him, huh?" Faith nodded. "I drew us all in a house together." Fiona froze. A pang of both warmth and caution shot through her. She recalled the moment Faith had scribbled stick figures in bright crayon, a child's vision of a happy trio. Fiona, Faith, and Andrew. The concept was terrifyingly sweet. She forced herself to stay realistic. Andrew was her temporary boss, not a friend or family. Even so, a tiny voice inside Fiona whispered that maybe Faith saw something Fiona wouldn't let herself see yet. She tucked the blanket around Faith, smoothing it over her small shoulders. "Let's get some rest," she said softly. "Big day tomorrow." As the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, Fiona shut her eyes. She was on the brink of a life-changing path, uncertain but hopeful. For once, she allowed herself the luxury of believing that with just a little bit of help, she might actually climb out of this cold basement and into a more secure future for her and Faith. And so, with Faith drifting off against her arm, Fiona let herself imagine the possibility that Andrew's unexpected offer wasn't a trap, but the start of something bigger, a way to stand on her own 2 feet without fear. The last thought that crossed her mind before sleep claimed her was simple, yet powerful. "I can do this for Faith." A biting gust of winter air swept across downtown Denver as Fiona stepped out of her aging sedan with Faith in tow. The city still carried a coat of snow from the night before, but bright morning sunshine gleamed off the sleek high-rises, giving everything a sharp, modern shine. Fiona took a breath and glanced at the towering structure housing Daily Deliver's main offices. Faith clutched a small, plush bunny, her breath fogging in the cold. "Mommy, why's the building so tall?" "Because they probably want everyone to see their fancy logo," Fiona replied, half joking. In truth, she felt a knot of nerves in her stomach. Stepping inside that glimmering lobby would be a whole new world, and she worried she might not fit in. In the lobby, the same receptionist from before wearing a fitted blazer over a turtleneck offered Fiona a bright smile. "Good morning, Miss Campbell. Mr. Ford is expecting you on the 12th floor." Fiona felt Faith squeeze her hand. "It's okay, honey," she whispered, bending to speak softly. "We'll be quick, then we'll find you a place to sit." Riding up the elevator, Faith pressed her nose to the glass panel. The city sprawled below, sunlight dancing on scattered patches of ice. Despite her nerves, Fiona couldn't help but find some excitement in the newness of it all. She was stepping beyond the daily hustle of deliveries, into a realm of offices and decision-makers. She hoped she wouldn't say something that made her sound foolish. When the doors glided open, Fiona was greeted by a minimalist reception space. Polished concrete floors, modern light fixtures, and walls decorated with artistic murals illustrating Daily Deliver's timeline. The design screamed money and ambition. Somewhere in the corner, a modern coffee machine hissed, filling the air with a faint aroma of espresso. Andrew emerged from a hallway, dressed in a crisp button-down and dark slacks. His face lit up when he saw Fiona and Faith. "Morning. Glad you made it." He shot an almost fatherly glance at Faith. "You doing okay, kiddo?" Faith nodded shyly. She held up her bunny as if to say hello. Andrew gestured toward a small lounge area where a cheerful young woman with a shoulder-length bob was waiting. "Fiona, this is Chloe. She's part of our marketing team, and she volunteered to help you get settled." Chloe gave a friendly wave. "Hi, Fiona. And you must be Faith. I set up a coloring station for you." She leaned down, hands on her knees, smiling at the little girl. "We've got crayons in every color you can imagine." Faith's eyes lit up. "Really? Even purple?" absolutely even sparkly purple. Fiona blinked, taken aback by the warm reception. It felt surreal that a corporate office would make these accommodations. "This is really nice of you," she managed. Andrew motioned for Fiona to follow him. "We'll have Faith hang out here with Chloe, and we can head to a small meeting with a few department heads. Nothing intense, just introductions." As Fiona let go of Faith's hand, the little girl sank cross-legged onto a beanbag near a low table stacked with coloring sheets. Chloe chatted with her about bunnies and favorite snacks. A pang of relief washed through Fiona. She might actually be able to focus on consulting if Faith was in good hands. Andrew guided Fiona into a glass-walled conference room. Inside, a broad table stretched before a wall of windows overlooking a crisp Denver skyline. 3 people waited there, each with a Daily Deliver ID clipped to a lanyard, a tech lead named Marcus, an operations manager named Heidi, and Eric Andrews' partner, the man she'd spotted briefly yesterday. Eric stood with a polite but cool expression. His gray-streaked hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit exuded confidence. Fiona sensed no immediate hostility, but his eyes held curiosity and caution, like he was scanning every detail about her. Andrew introduced Fiona as the driver experience consultant. A flicker of something crossed Eric's face, maybe skepticism. She braced herself. "So, Fiona," Heidi began, leaning forward with a notepad in hand, "Andrew tells us you've been driving for Daily Deliver for a few months. We're curious about your day-to-day experiences." "Sure," Fiona said, swallowing. "I can share whatever would help. Most drivers I know juggle tight schedules, childcare, and vehicle expenses. It's a lot to manage." Marcus typed notes into a laptop. "Are we talking about big city routes only, or do you also drive to suburban or mountainous areas?" "I do all kinds of routes," Fiona replied. "Some nights I get requests that take me out of the city near the foothills. Weather gets unpredictable. Tire chains are an expense, and tips can be hit or miss." Eric tapped his pen on the table. "We've had driver surveys before. They mention these concerns. But how do we fix them without overspending?" Andrew interjected, calm but firm. "That's why Fiona's here. She understands the real stakes. If we ignore driver morale, we lose them. Then we can't fulfill orders properly." Eric's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. We'll see how this goes. Welcome aboard, Fiona." It felt like a lukewarm acceptance, yet still an acceptance. Fiona exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She spent the next hour fielding more questions about app interface problems, scheduling shortfalls, and how ratings were calculated. Andrew's presence next to her felt reassuring any time she stumbled. He'd step in with a clarifying question or statement. By the end, she was mentally drained, but oddly satisfied. This was new territory for her being listened to by business professionals. Maybe she could truly make a difference. As the meeting wrapped, Eric slipped out without much fanfare. Heidi and Marcus offered friendly thanks, promising they'd reach out later. Andrew turned to Fiona. "Good job," he said softly. "You handled that like a pro." She gave a modest shrug. "Just telling it like it is, not sure if that's professional." He smiled. "Trust me, that's exactly what we need." After lunch, Andrew escorted Fiona around the 12th floor, showing her various departments. She tried to memorize faces and names. Marketing folks brainstorming ad campaigns, tech teams coding on large monitors, support staff fielding driver phone calls. This building buzzed with the energy of innovation completely different from the lonely car rides she was used to. When they circled back to the open lounge, Faith was happily coloring a page filled with cartoonish mountains and animals. Chloe offered Fiona a thumbs-up. "She's a sweetheart," Chloe said. "We just had a snack break, and she told me all about her favorite songs." Fiona knelt beside Faith. "You okay?" "Uh-huh," Faith mumbled, focused on making sure her drawn bunny had just the right shade of purple. Andrew lingered, checking his phone. "We have a quick session in 5 minutes with the tech leads, Fiona. Want to join?" "I think Faith will be fine with Chloe a bit longer." Fiona hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." She pressed a kiss to Faith's head, grateful for the help. The tech leads were gathered in a small conference nook cluttered with whiteboards scribbled over with lines of code and flowcharts. Laptops and half-empty coffee cups littered the table. Once again, Fiona explained the driver's perspective, glitchy route planning, sudden app crashes during busy dinner hours, and how those hiccups cost drivers time and tips. One of the programmers frowned. "We've run stress tests. The system should handle peak loads." Fiona gave a tight smile. "Theory is different from real roads. Maybe you need to run a test while the app is actually handling real users, or gather data from drivers mid-shift. That's when the meltdown usually happens." They fell silent, considering it. Andrew shot Fiona an approving look, and she felt a flicker of confidence. She was bridging a gap between code and reality. Midway through the discussion, Eric stepped into the nook. He stood there, arms crossed, quietly observing the back and forth. Fiona's pulse quickened. She sensed tension. "You're suggesting we run continuous monitoring during peak hours," Eric stated, addressing Fiona. "That means allocating developer resources we don't exactly have." Andrew glanced at him. "Then we should find them," he said evenly. "We can't keep losing drivers because they get stuck with a frozen app at 6 p.m. Eric exhaled a short sigh. "Of course we need improvements. I just want to keep in mind our budget and deadlines." Fiona listened, feeling the shift in the room. Everyone was cautious of stepping on Eric's authority. He was a co-founder, after all. Yet Andrew stood firm, and Fiona for once found herself on the edge of this corporate tug-of-war. It was both thrilling and unnerving. At last, Eric turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for your input, Fiona. It's valuable. We'll factor it in and see what we can do." Then he made a quick exit, phone to his ear. The air in the nook felt heavy for a moment. One of the tech leads cleared his throat and tried to move on, but Fiona knew that uneasy feeling she'd stepped onto a battlefield of business priorities. Andrew brushed it off with a simple nod, and they wrapped up soon after. Back at the lounge, they found Faith bouncing a little rubber ball, giggling as it skittered across the floor. Chloe laughed, chasing after it. Despite the corporate environment, it seemed Faith's presence brought a burst of youthful energy. "You want to head home soon?" Andrew asked Fiona gently. "You've done enough for the day, I think." Fiona sighed. She was tired, but also strangely invigorated. "Yeah, that might be best. Don't want to overstay my welcome." Andrew smiled. "You're not overstaying anything. This is your workplace now, at least for the week." He hesitated, then added, "Let me know if you need a ride. Weather's still pretty icy out there." She remembered her gas gauge dipping dangerously low. Pride said she should refuse, but practicality made her pause. "If it's not out of your way." "Not at all," Andrew said, quick to reassure. "I'll swing by the parking structure. You can leave your car here tonight. We'll make sure it's safe." Fiona relayed the plan to Faith, who hopped up eagerly. "Are we going in the big car again?" Andrew ruffled her hair. "Yep, same big SUV. Ready to go?" "Let's do it." Fiona gathered Faith's coat and backpack. She thanked Chloe for her help, then gave a polite nod to the employees still lingering in the open workspace. As they stepped into the elevator, Fiona caught a glimpse of Eric across the floor, eyes narrowed as he watched them leave. She tried not to read too much into his expression. Night blanketed Denver by the time Andrew drove them through slushy streets toward Fiona's neighborhood. Streetlights glowed in hazy halos from the swirling snow. Faith dozed in the back seat, lulled by the gentle hum of the SUV's heater. Fiona gazed out the window, noticing the stark contrast of bright, modern condos and older row houses. Her own building wasn't in the best part of town, but it was what she could manage on meager earnings. She glanced sideways at Andrew. He navigated the icy roads with care, the tension in his jaw betraying focus. "Long day," Andrew said after a moment, his voice low. "You were great, though. Everyone appreciated your insights." Fiona toyed with the zipper on her jacket. "Thanks. Feels odd I'm used to just delivering food. Now I'm telling corporate teams how to fix their systems." She paused. "Eric." He didn't seem thrilled. Andrew's gaze flicked up to the rearview mirror, checking on Faith. "Eric is results-driven, and he's protective of the bottom line. Don't take it personally. He'll come around once he sees how improvements boost driver loyalty." She nodded, uncertain. "What made you start Daily Deliver anyway?" Andrew shrugged, glancing between her and the dark road ahead. I grew up middle class, but my folks worked themselves ragged. My mom was a server, my dad a mechanic. I saw how they struggled with irregular pay and no safety nets. When I came up with Daily Deliver, I wanted to create flexible job opportunities. But as we scaled up, I lost some direct control. Hence these cracks in the system. Fiona felt a wave of empathy. She didn't expect Andrew to have such a personal motivation. "I hope it all works out," she said softly. He gave a crooked smile. "Thanks, me too." When they pulled up to Fiona's apartment complex, Andrew parked near a flickering street lamp. The building looked even more run down next to his shiny SUV peeling paint, metal stairs caked with ice, a lone overhead bulb casting weak light. Fiona felt a flush of embarrassment. She gently shook Faith awake. The child blinked groggily and yawned. "We're home." "Yeah, sweetie," Fiona murmured. Andrew turned off the engine. "Here, let me walk you two inside. Those steps look slippery." Normally Fiona would protest, but the ice was treacherous, and she didn't want Faith or herself taking a tumble. She thanked him quietly, cradling Faith in her arms as Andrew steadied them up the rickety stairs. The door to her unit squeaked open to reveal the small living space, still drafty in the winter chill. Andrew paused in the doorway, taking in the cramped environment. Fiona felt self-conscious about the mismatched furniture, the old space heater humming by the wall. But he made no comment, just asked, "You got everything you need tonight?" She noticed the warmth in his voice, genuine concern. "We'll be fine," she said, setting Faith on the futon. "I might have to scrounge up something for dinner. Not sure what's left in the fridge." A wry smile tugged at her lips. Andrew reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. "Look, if you ever need groceries or a ride, call me. I don't want you or Faith freezing or going hungry. This is just in case." Fiona's eyes stung with a sudden urge to cry. She swallowed hard, refusing to let tears spill over. "Thank you," she whispered. I'll be okay, though." He nodded, respecting her independence. He glanced at Faith, who was half asleep on the lumpy cushion, then returned his gaze to Fiona. "See you tomorrow, then? We'll go over more app improvements." "Yeah, I'll be there." She tried to keep her voice steady. A moment of soft silence hung between them, the winter wind rattling the single-pane window. Then Andrew offered a gentle smile, turned and stepped out into the cold, carefully descending the icy stairs. Fiona stood at the threshold, watching him disappear into the swirling snow. She closed the door softly and slumped against it, exhaling a shaky breath. The day's events played on a loop in her head. The corporate meetings, Eric's skepticism, the glimpses of kindness from Andrew. It felt like more had happened in one day than in her last few months combined. She tugged off her coat and set it aside. Faith stirred, waking enough to say, "Is Mr. Andrew nice?" Fiona approached and tucked a thin blanket around her daughter. "Yeah, baby, he's nice." Faith's eyes fluttered. "He gave me crayons, he's like a—" She didn't finish the sentence, drifting back to sleep. Fiona sat for a moment in the quiet, battered apartment. Maybe life was handing her a shot at stability, or maybe it was just a temporary reprieve. Either way, she couldn't deny the flicker of hope she felt. She brushed a gentle hand over Faith's hair, promising herself she'd do everything possible to make their lives better, even if it meant pushing through corporate challenges, skeptics like Eric, and her own lingering fears. Morning dawned behind a veil of gray clouds, and Fiona was up early, layering clothes against the chill. She dropped Faith off at a neighbor's for a few hours, Jessica, a kind single mom who sometimes helped watch the kids in the building. It hurt to leave Faith behind, but Fiona hoped soon she could afford proper daycare. At Daily Deliver HQ, the atmosphere felt alive with hustle. Employees bustled around with Togo cups of coffee, greeting each other with quick nods as they hustled to morning huddles. Fiona made her way to Andrew's office space, a glass-walled corner with a sweeping view of downtown. She spotted him inside, in conversation with Eric. She hovered in the doorway, not wanting to barge in. Eric had his arms crossed, a faint scowl on his face. Andrew spoke calmly, though there was an undercurrent of tension. "Long-term driver retention matters more than short-term profit," Fiona heard Andrew say. Then he spotted her and waved her in. Eric turned, eyebrows lifting. "Morning, Fiona," he greeted, polite but distant. Hi, she replied. Her eyes darted between them. Am I interrupting? No, Andrew assured. We were just discussing budget allocations. Eric exhaled. We'll continue this later. He collected some files and gave Fiona a quick nod before leaving the office. A hush settled. Fiona cleared her throat. You two okay? Andrew rubbed the back of his neck. We just have different approaches. He's been worried about expenditures. But anyway, how's Faith? Fiona smiled. She's good. I left her with a neighbor. I didn't want to keep dragging her out in this cold. Andrew nodded. Understood. Listen, a few more team leads want to chat with you about practical improvements. Then I thought you might join me for a meeting with a local business association. They're awarding us some recognition, sort of a warm-up for next month's bigger event. Fiona tensed. She remembered how out of place she'd felt just going to the main office, let alone an award ceremony. I'm not sure I belong in that kind of meeting. Andrew waved her concern off. You do. They want to hear how we're supporting drivers directly. You're literally the voice of our driver community right now. She inhaled slowly, letting the knot in her stomach loosen. All right, if you think it helps. Andrew offered a smile of encouragement. Believe me, it does. The rest of the morning, Fiona found herself bouncing between short one-on-ones with department staff. She'd relay specific anecdotes. The cost of new tires in snowy Denver, how a canceled order mid-route could ruin a driver's shift, or how surging demands during blizzards meant better pay for some but impossible commutes for others. Each conversation felt like it chipped away at some disconnect in the corporate mindset. Early afternoon, Andrew and Fiona stepped out of the building into a chilly wind, heading to a small conference hall a few blocks away. The sun peeked through ragged clouds, reflecting off slushy sidewalks. Andrew walked beside Fiona, occasionally guiding her around slick spots. She tried not to read too much into his gestures, but warmth spread in her chest every time he took that protective stance. At the conference hall, they were greeted by a handful of local business leaders. Name tags, suits, and polite chatter filled the room. A low stage at the front displayed banners for community outreach programs. Fiona felt a spike of nerves upon noticing cameras from local news outlets. She tugged her sweater sleeves down, wishing she'd worn something more formal. Andrew gave her a reassuring nod. Just speak from your heart if they ask you anything, he whispered. You know the real driver stories. That matters more than business jargon. So when a city council representative asked about how Daily Deliver intended to support working parents who drive for them, Fiona found herself clearing her throat and speaking into a microphone. Her voice shook at first, but as she described the challenges needing flexible hours yet stable pay, car troubles, no safety net for childcare, she gained traction. She used metaphors, saying, some days it's like walking a tightrope with no net. You slip, you lose everything. Her honesty drew sympathetic nods from the small crowd. When she finished, Andrew caught her eye, offering a small, proud smile. A ripple of quiet applause followed, and Fiona's cheeks warmed. She never imagined she'd be presenting anything to city officials. Eric wasn't present to witness it. He'd had other commitments, Andrew explained earlier. Yet Fiona felt a twinge of relief. She wasn't sure she could handle his skeptical eyes on her in that setting. Afterward, they paused in the hallway, waiting for an elevator. Andrew turned to her, voice low. You spoke beautifully, exactly what we need more people to hear. Fiona searched his face. Thanks, it's just the truth. He chuckled softly. The truth can be powerful. It's easy to forget that behind every app login there's someone like you living day to day. For a moment, they stood there, tension crackling with an unspoken closeness. Fiona felt her pulse quicken. This was more than just a boss-employee vibe, but she wasn't sure how to interpret it. She recalled her vow not to mix personal feelings with work. And yet the elevator dinged. Andrew gestured for her to step in first, his expression careful. The crowd inside parted slightly to let them squeeze in. During the ride down, they avoided each other's gaze, like they both understood a line was there but weren't entirely certain if they'd cross it. Back at HQ, Fiona found Faith again in Chloe's care. Faith eagerly showcased a new drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Fiona's stomach knotted at the sight. Two tall figures, one small child. Chloe's grin was oblivious. She's got some imagination, huh? Fiona forced a small laugh. She does. She didn't dare look at Andrew just yet. She folded the picture and tucked it into her bag, heart fluttering. Before they left for the day, Eric swung by the lounge, glancing at Faith's crayons sprawled over a table. "We're not a daycare, Andrew," he remarked softly, voice devoid of humor. Andrew's jaw clenched. "I know," he said. "But it's temporary. Fiona's doing crucial work. We're accommodating her situation." Eric nodded slowly, eyes flicking to Fiona. "Let's hope it's worth it." With that, he left, leaving an undercurrent of tension in the air. Fiona inhaled, preparing for the worst, but Andrew placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about Eric. He's just under pressure." She offered a faint smile, uncertain if she was a mere inconvenience or if she could truly reshape things at Daily Deliver. Yet as she buckled Faith into her old sedan that evening, having opted to drive herself today, she remembered the applause at the business association event, the supportive colleagues, Andrew's subtle kindness. Maybe she was making a difference, even if it meant stepping gingerly around Eric's disapproval. With that hopeful thought, she turned the ignition, carefully eased onto the snowy road, and headed home, bracing for whatever came next in this unexpected journey. The Denver Convention Center buzzed with life, tall glass windows reflecting the snowy city outside. Fiona stepped through the rotating doors, heart pounding. She'd never been inside a venue this grand, let alone for an award ceremony. The program banner read, "Best Startup of the Year," with the Daily Deliver logo featured prominently among other contenders. She could practically feel the polished marble floor under her modest heels. The overhead lights gleamed off her borrowed dress, a simple navy sheath she'd found on short notice. Across the room, executives chatted in tailored suits, journalists snapped photos, and caterers wove gracefully with trays of canapes. "Fiona!" came Andrew's voice, cutting through her nerves. He approached from the side, wearing a sleek charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. His eyes swept over her outfit with genuine appreciation. "I'm glad you made it. You look really nice." She offered a shy nod. "I feel out of place, honestly. Thanks for inviting me, but I'm not exactly award ceremony material." Andrew's smile was reassuring. "You've played a huge part in improving driver relations these last few weeks. These people need to hear that real story." Fiona tried not to fidget. She'd left Faith with a trusted neighbor, Miss Grady, an older woman who'd insisted Fiona take a night to experience something beyond diapers and deliveries. But guilt still gnawed at her. She hated being away so late. They made their way through the crowd, pausing for occasional greetings. Andrew introduced her to a couple of local venture capitalists who were curious about the consultant background. Fiona did her best to field their polite questions, though her voice trembled. She was keenly aware that Eric lurked somewhere, and she expected his disapproval at any moment. At last they found a quiet corner near the stage, half hidden by a velvety curtain. Andrew guided her to a tall table, leaning in to be heard over the chatter. "The ceremony starts soon. We're up for the big award, but there's also a short segment about driver outreach. They might ask you to say a few words." Her stomach flipped. "I'm not used to public speaking, let alone with cameras." Andrew's gaze was warm. "Speak from the heart, like you did at the business association. People connect with authenticity. That's what matters here." Fiona inhaled slowly, letting his confidence anchor her. "I'll try." Before she could say more, a voice she didn't recognize cut in. "Andrew, it's been ages." Turning, Fiona spotted a statuesque blonde woman in a striking emerald dress. Her makeup was flawlessly done, and she exuded the poise of someone used to commanding a room. Andrew's posture stiffened. Fiona guessed immediately this was Ivy, the ex Andrew had mentioned once in passing. "Ivy," Andrew said curtly, dipping his head in greeting. "Didn't realize you'd be here." She smiled, though it never reached her eyes. "Why wouldn't I come? My firm invests in half the startups recognized tonight." Her gaze slid to Fiona, sizing her up in a single sweep. "And you must be the new face of Daily Deliver's community initiatives?" Fiona swallowed, uneasy. I'm Fiona. I help with driver experiences. Ivy's eyes flickered with a trace of condescension. That's lovely. Andrew always did have a soft spot for helping people. She paused, a coy edge to her tone. He used to talk about philanthropic programs back when we were engaged, but I see he's found a more direct approach now. Fiona's cheeks burned. She had no idea how to respond. Andrew's jaw tightened, and he opened his mouth to speak, but the overhead speakers interrupted, announcing the ceremony's start. Ivy flashed a polite smile. Good luck up there, Andrew. Oh, and Fiona, was it? I'm sure we'll chat again soon. I'm very curious about your perspective. With that, she pivoted gracefully and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and an unsettling vibe. Andrew exhaled. Sorry about that. She's not exactly the friendliest. Fiona mustered a shrug. No kidding. An hour later, the stage lights dimmed, and the event's host introduced the nominees for Best Startup of the Year. Daily Deliver's achievements were lauded its rapid growth, innovative approach, and potential for revolutionizing gig work. Fiona stood beside Andrew, clapping politely for other finalists. She tried to quell the jitters pulsing through her veins. Faith's face flashed in her mind. Bright eyes, warm grin, the way she said, "Mommy, you can do anything." Fiona drew courage from that memory. And now, the host announced, we'd like to invite Mr. Andrew Ford from Daily Deliver to accept tonight's award. Andrew, please come to the stage. Applause erupted. Andrew shot Fiona a quick, humble smile, then strode to the microphone. Under the spotlight, he offered his thanks to the team, highlighting how driver insights had powered them forward. He gestured toward Fiona in the audience. Her heart lurched as heads turned to spot her. Fiona Campbell helped us understand the everyday realities of deliveries, Andrew continued. She's taught us that behind every route is a human story, one that deserves respect and better working conditions. Fiona's cheeks warmed under the polite applause. She forced a small wave, feeling eyes on her. After Andrew's short acceptance speech, the crowd thinned as people migrated to the open bar and reception area. Fiona wandered near a table displaying sponsor brochures, breathing in relief. She wondered if she'd be expected to talk in front of everyone, but perhaps Andrew's mention was enough. Suddenly, Ivy materialized at Fiona's side, swirling a glass of champagne. You must be so proud, she purred, glancing at Andrew from a distance. He's always had a thing for saving lost causes, didn't he? Fiona stiffened. Excuse me? Ivy sipped her drink. Relax, darling. I'm not insulting you. I'm just curious how you feel about Andrew's charitable streak. Did he tell you about his little driver assistance fund, the one he's been funneling money into for months? Some would call that philanthropic. Others might call it coddling. Fiona's heart pounded. She had no clue about any hush-hush fund. I don't know what you're talking about. Ivy gave a mirthless laugh. Of course you don't. Typical Andrew, he always tries to hide it until the last moment like a knight in shining armor swooping in. He used to do it with my business deals too, meddling behind the scenes. She leaned closer, voice dropping. You should check the financials. He's been depositing bonus payments to select drivers, long before you two officially met. Just makes me wonder if this entire arrangement was planned from the start. Fiona's stomach twisted. Was that possible? Had Andrew specifically targeted her? She recalled the first night they met, the messy spill, his offer to pay double. Was it all orchestrated? Ivy read her expression, then stepped back with a smile. No need to look so upset. Andrew's intentions are usually well-meaning, but he does have a habit of picking favorites. And people talk. You know, some might say you're just the latest in his line of charitable projects. Ivy placed the champagne flute on a nearby tray and offered Fiona a half-smile dripping with faux sympathy. I'm sure you'll figure it out, dear. Have a lovely evening. Icy dread rippled through Fiona. She forced herself not to chase Ivy down for more details. Her chest felt tight, conflicting emotions swirling. She'd believed she was simply lucky that Andrew recognized her competence. Now, questions tore at her confidence. Had he singled her out as some pity case? Was their entire bond built on charity? Not long afterward, the lights dimmed again for a final set of remarks. Fiona's mind was a storm, but she managed to slip back into the main hall. Andrew spotted her near the side aisle, brow creased in concern. "There you are," he whispered. "Everything okay?" Her mouth felt dry. She tried to force a calm face. I'm fine." He watched her another beat. Then the host's voice cut in, prompting the audience's attention. The ceremony concluded with brief speeches from local investors, among them Ivy. She took the stage elegantly, praising Denver's startup ecosystem, congratulating winners, and then almost casually mentioned how certain founders go above and beyond, privately funding individuals in dire need. She shot a glance at Andrew. Fiona's pulse soared. Was Ivy using the podium to hint at Andrew's hush-hush money dispersals? When the event ended, clusters of attendees drifted to the lobby for cocktails. Fiona noticed Eric standing near a marble pillar, scanning the crowd as if he'd overheard something disquieting. She hesitated, not sure if she wanted to ask him about the rumored driver fund, or if that had just stoked new tensions. Before she could decide, Andrew gently touched her shoulder. "Fiona, let's talk outside." She let him guide her through the glass doors into Denver's cold night. Snow flurries danced under street lamps. The hush of the city, broken only by distant traffic, made her shiver. Andrew draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. She clutched it, grateful for the warmth but reeling from suspicion. "You look shaken," he murmured. "Did Ivy say something to you?" Fiona's lips parted, but the words tangled. Should she come right out and accuse him? She took a trembling breath. "She mentioned some secret driver assistance fund. Said you've been funneling money to certain drivers long before we met." Andrew's eyes flared with surprise, then shame. "That?" He stopped short, exhaling. "Yes, there's a small program. I'd seen data about drivers who were close to defaulting on car payments, or who had kids and were behind on rent. So I authorized discrete bonuses for those in dire need." Her heartbeat hammered. "So you were basically handing out charity to drivers like me while acting like it was just a chance encounter?" He lifted his palms, voice urgent. "I never planned that first night. The actual meeting was pure coincidence. But I already knew your name from the driver database. I recognized your situation, car trouble, single parent, consistently high ratings. You'd popped up in the bonus queue, but you never accepted it." She recalled random deposit anomalies that she'd attributed to a glitch or rounding error. Her cheeks burned. "So that money that sometimes popped up in my account, that was from you?" Andrew's expression was pained. "Fiona, it wasn't personal. It was for many drivers in tough spots. I was trying to fix the system quietly. My board wouldn't approve official relief funds, so I did it under the radar." Anger and humiliation throbbed in her chest. "You let me think I was doing well on my own, when really you were pulling strings. You turned me into your pity project." Andrew's tone rose, raw desperation shining through. "It was never pity. I believed in your work ethic, your potential. Those small infusions were meant to keep good people afloat, not belittle them." Fiona shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. All her pride in forging a path for faith, was it just an illusion? The memory of Ivy's smug face twisted like a knife. "How can I trust anything now?" Fiona whispered. "Was everything you did letting me consult, praising my input just part of some plan to keep me around to make yourself feel better?" He tried to reach for her hand, but she jerked away. "No, I swear, I admire you, Fiona. That day I invited you inside, it wasn't about your file. It was about seeing a hard-working mother on the brink of collapse. I wanted to help genuinely." Her vision blurred. She thought of Faith's drawings, the long conversations with Andrew about improving driver conditions. She wanted so badly to believe him. But a cold voice in her head reminded her how powerless she'd felt, always living on the edge. He was the wealthy CEO, pulling levers in secret. "Just stop," she said raggedly. "I can't deal with this right now. I need to go." Andrew's eyes brimmed with regret. Snow dusted his hair, the city's neon casting harsh shadows across his face. "Fiona, please." But she turned away, practically running from him down the slushy sidewalk, tears hot on her cheeks. She caught a rideshare home, refusing to let Andrew follow. The entire journey, her mind whirled with confusion and betrayal. She dreaded explaining any of this to Faith in the morning and dreaded returning to a job that suddenly felt like a giant lie. Early the next day, Fiona stepped into Daily Deliver HQ for what she intended to be the last time. Eyes burning from lack of sleep, she marched straight to the HR desk. She'd typed up a terse resignation letter. The clerk blinked in surprise as she handed it over. "Miss Campbell, are you sure? I'll have to inform Mr. Ford." "Do what you want," she muttered. "I'm done." She made her way to what had become her temporary workspace, a small desk near the lounge. Boxes, small personal items, and Faith's crayons cluttered the surface. Her chest tightened at the sight of the bright drawings pinned on the corkboard sunshine. A house, 3 smiling stick figures. So naive, she thought, tears pricking her eyes again. The elevator chimed. Andrew emerged, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He approached, voice low with urgency. "Fiona, you're really quitting?" She lifted a cardboard box of supplies. "Yes, I need to prove I can stand on my own, that I'm not just some paycheck you dole out from your hush-hush fund. Don't you get that?" His gaze was haunted. "I get it, but you're throwing away months of progress for yourself, for drivers." She swallowed hard. "It's not about them. It's about me. I can't work here. Always wondering if I only got this chance because you pitied me." Andrew's hands clenched. "It was never pity. You're brilliant, Fiona. You changed the entire direction of our driver policy. That's real." She brushed past him, tears threatening to spill. Eric loomed in the corridor, watchful. She caught his perplexed expression but ignored it, stepping into the elevator with the box pressed to her chest. Andrew followed, but she pressed the button, the doors sliding shut before he could slip inside. Her heart hammered as the elevator descended. A swirl of heartbreak, anger, and residual gratitude tore at her insides. Andrew had done so much good she couldn't deny that. But the secrecy about the fund eroded her trust, leaving her feeling manipulated and small. Once on the ground floor, she hurried across the lobby, ignoring curious glances from staff. Outside, the Denver cold slapped her face. But it was nothing compared to the emptiness in her chest. It felt like a piece of her was left behind, roiling in complicated tension. By afternoon, she'd packed what little she owned at home, too. She couldn't stand living so close to that job, that memory. Within a few days, she relocated to a cheaper apartment on the rickety outskirts of Denver, further from the new skyline tower that haunted her dreams. She scrolled job boards, determined to land on her feet again. Faith was her anchor. She had to keep moving forward for that sweet, curious little girl. At bedtime, Faith tugged at Fiona's sleeve. "Mama, are we going to see Mr. Andrew again?" Fiona's chest constricted. "Not right now, honey." She brushed a hand over Faith's hair. He's busy, and we need some space." Faith blinked, confusion in her wide eyes. "But I drew him pictures." A tear escaped Fiona's eye before she could stop it. She scooped Faith into a hug. "I know, baby, I'm so sorry." As she tucked her child in, the city lights flickered through the thin curtains. Somewhere across Denver, Andrew was probably in his penthouse, carrying the same ache, but she couldn't see a way to fix it. Not after the trust between them shattered like delicate glass on an icy sidewalk. Denver's skyline stretched under a bleak winter sun as Fiona navigated her aging sedan toward the Transp's headquarters. 2 weeks had passed since she'd quit Daily Deliver, but her decision still felt raw. Bills piled up faster than the snowfall in her rundown neighborhood, so the job offer from Transp's came at the perfect time, maybe even a lifeline. Transp's office building wasn't as swanky as Andrew's tower, but it hummed with the same entrepreneurial energy. A short elevator ride took Fiona to the reception area, where a bright sign read, "Transp's, redefining ride and delivery services." She smoothed down her modest blazer, desperately hoping to appear confident. A middle-aged HR coordinator greeted her. "Welcome aboard, Miss Campbell. We're thrilled to have you as our new driver experience manager." Fiona forced a smile. "Thank you. I'm happy for the opportunity." Inside the main workspace, desks were arranged in tight clusters, employees hurriedly discussing new route optimizations, driver incentives, and app interface tweaks. It reminded her of her first days at Daily Deliver. Though she shoved that thought away, she couldn't dwell on Andrew or the betrayal she'd felt. Just after a quick orientation, the HR coordinator guided Fiona to a modest corner desk with a half partition. Stacks of driver feedback forms were already waiting, plus an overworked email inbox flagged with urgent messages. She let out a small sigh time to dive in. Half an hour later, while poring over driver complaints about tip transparency, her phone buzzed. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Possibly a vendor or a new coworker? "Hello?" she answered, still typing one-handed. A harsh chuckle came from the other side. "Fiona, been a while." Her stomach clenched. "Ethan," she breathed. Faith's father. The last time she'd spoken to him, she'd been pregnant, heartbroken, and desperate for support that never came. "In the flesh," he said, a smug edge to his tone. "Heard you're some big shot manager now. Guess you're no longer slinging fries at that food app?" She bristled. He'd always been dismissive of her efforts. "What do you want?" He sniffed. "I have a right to know how my daughter's doing. Word around town is you're climbing the corporate ladder, so maybe you're flush with cash now, huh?" Her pulse ticked faster. Ethan had never shown genuine interest in Faith, just opportunistic curiosity. She hated the fact that some mutual acquaintance must have told him about her new job. "Faith is fine," she said tersely. "We don't need anything from you." He let out a sarcastic laugh. "That's not for you to decide alone. I've been thinking about stepping up as a father. Maybe Faith deserves my involvement." Icy dread gripped her. Involvement? She doubted Ethan wanted to be a real parent. He sounded like a vulture circling fresh prey. "Don't even start. You walked away when I needed you most." "I've changed," he drawled. "And with you working full-time, you might struggle to give Faith that attention. Unless, of course, you want to talk about some financial arrangements. But hey, maybe I'll just fight for custody if you're so sure you don't need me." Fiona's hand trembled around the phone. "Don't you dare threaten me." He tisked. "Lighten up. I'm just saying a court might see that you work long hours now. Maybe your home environment isn't stable. We could come to a mutually beneficial solution. But if you won't negotiate, I guess I'll see you in court." The line clicked dead. Fiona's heart pounded so hard she was sure the entire office could hear it. She slumped in her chair, pulse roaring in her ears. Ethan was trouble, always had been. Now he'd set his sights on Faith for some twisted reason. A coworker in the next cubicle glanced over in concern. "Everything okay?" Fiona fumbled to rearrange driver feedback papers, forcing a nod. "Just old personal stuff. I'll be fine." Inside, she was anything but fine. She'd fought so hard to stand on her own, and now Ethan threatened to yank her world apart. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. Fiona struggled to concentrate on Transpeace's tasks, overshadowed by the fear that Ethan would follow through with his threat. She tried to reassure Faith that everything was normal, keeping the tension hidden behind forced smiles. But late at night, she scoured the internet for custody law advice. Legal fees would be crippling. One snowy afternoon, a knock sounded at Fiona's flimsy apartment door. She opened it to find a courier holding an official envelope. "Fiona Campbell?" the courier asked, glancing at a clipboard. "That's me." He handed over the envelope with a polite grimace. "You've been served." Her stomach twisted. She tore the seal to reveal a court summons. Ethan Coleman had filed a petition seeking partial or possibly full custody of Faith. Her vision blurred. She stumbled onto her worn couch, heart battered by shock and rage. "He can't do this," she muttered, scanning legal jargon that made her head spin. Something about proving stable income, living conditions, child welfare. She was stable in some ways, but her finances were precarious, her new job untested. Ethan could spin that. The thought of losing Faith made her chest ache. She pressed her palm over her eyes, fighting tears. Calm down. Think logically. She needed a lawyer, but she had no savings for that. If she lost, Faith might be forced into Ethan's custody. The mere idea made her want to scream. Days later, the grim scenario got worse. Under pressure, Fiona confided in a Transpeace coworker named Jill. Jill recommended a budget-friendly lawyer, but even that cost was beyond Fiona's means. She contemplated draining her meager emergency fund, still not enough to handle a real custody battle. Meanwhile, the court date loomed in a few short weeks. One evening, after putting Faith to bed, Fiona paced the living room, phone in hand. Her mind kept drifting to Andrew. Despite everything, she remembered how resourceful and well-connected he was. She typed out a message to him multiple times, only to delete it in a wave of stubborn pride. She refused to ask him for help, not after how things ended. She'd sworn she'd stand on her own, and she'd do it even if it felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. Meanwhile, across town, Andrew sat in his penthouse office. The wide windows showcased Denver's nighttime skyline shimmering like distant stars. He stared at a short email from an ex-colleague who casually mentioned, "Fiona is in legal trouble with her daughter's father." Andrew's chest tightened. Legal trouble? With Faith? Anxious thoughts churned. He ran a hand through his hair. He hadn't spoken to Fiona since she quit. He missed them, her spirited drive, Faith's unfiltered joy. But if she didn't want his help, how could he insert himself without making it worse? Every day, guilt gnawed at him. Now, the idea that Fiona might lose custody to an irresponsible ex made him furious and terrified. He also recalled how Eric had once mentioned a top-notch family attorney they'd used for a corporate matter. Maybe Andrew could do something behind the scenes. But he hesitated, worried any secret meddling would echo the same paternalistic pattern that had driven Fiona away. Still, the thought of Faith living with a negligent father overshadowed that caution. Andrew typed a quick message to Eric. "We need to talk about a pro bono custody lawyer. It's urgent." A week later, Fiona's phone buzzed again as she trudged out of her new office at Transpeace. She saw Andrew's name on the screen. Her heart lurched, confusion and longing mingling. Should she ignore it? She answered, voice tight. "Andrew." "Fiona," came his subdued tone. "I heard about Ethan. Are you okay?" Tears pricked her eyes at the genuine concern. She swallowed them down. "I'll manage." He paused, an undercurrent of tension crackling over the phone. "Let me help. I know a great lawyer, someone with a track record of winning custody cases for responsible single mothers. I can put them on retainer, no strings attached." Her pulse quickened. "Andrew, no. I can't owe you more. That's exactly the problem from before." "This isn't about debt," Andrew said quietly, sincerity lacing every syllable. "It's about Faith. She shouldn't be used as a pawn by someone unfit to care for her. Let me do this, please." Fiona stared at the gray sky overhead, snow drifting lazily. She despised the idea of more financial ties to Andrew, but Faith's future was at stake, and she was cornered. "I don't want to be your charity project," she mumbled. "You're not," he insisted. "You're a partner, a friend I care about. If you let Ethan push you into a corner just to avoid my help, Faith might suffer for it." Her chest clenched. He's right. She couldn't gamble with Faith's well-being. Warring emotions roiled inside her, but the memory of Faith giggling in the living room hammered home how critical this was. "Fine," she whispered at last, "but only if I can pay you back eventually. Every cent." Andrew let out a breath, relief flooding his voice. "Deal. I'll have Eric arrange the consultation. Just trust me, okay?" A murmur of old bitterness flared. "I'll trust the attorney, not you." She paused, regret flashing at the hurt that might cause. "But thank you, Andrew, for Faith's sake." Silence hummed between them, pregnant with complicated feelings. "I'm just glad you let me help," Andrew said finally, voice thick. "I'll text you the details. Court is soon, right?" Fiona closed her eyes. "Yeah." 2 weeks. Then we move fast. When she ended the call, her chest felt hollowed out, but somehow lighter. Maybe there was a flicker of hope. She'd do anything to ensure Faith stayed where she belonged. That night, a knock on Fiona's apartment door revealed a sharply dressed man in his 40s carrying a briefcase. "Miss Campbell, I'm Mr. Lawson, your attorney. Mr. Ford arranged for me to handle your custody case pro bono." He extended a professional grin. "Shall we discuss the details?" Fiona invited him in, uneasy but determined. Mr. Lawson broke down the situation clearly. "We'll gather evidence of your stable job, your home environment, and reasons Ethan is unfit." She swallowed. "He was never around. Has a record of occasional scrapes with the law. I just don't have it all documented." Lawson nodded. "Mr. Ford provided some documentation, financial records, references to possible gambling debts, bar fights. We can use that." Her heart panged at Andrew's behind-the-scenes work. She nodded stiffly. Yes, that's helpful. For the next hour, they strategized. Fiona felt slightly more confident, but also she couldn't ignore the pang of gratitude toward Andrew that warred with her lingering resentment. Focus on faith, she told herself. Just focus on faith. The day of the hearing dawned cold and clear. Fiona stood outside Denver's family courthouse, her breath pluming in the icy morning air. She held Faith's small hand, the girl wide-eyed at the imposing stone facade. Next to Fiona, Mr. Lawson offered a composed nod. "We've got this," he said quietly. Inside, the hallway bustled with people-anxious families, attorneys juggling files. Fiona spotted Ethan leaning against a wall, wearing a smug grin. Her stomach turned. He flicked a glance at Faith, expression chillingly detached, then strode over. "Hey there, Fiona," he drawled. "All set to lose?" She glared, pulling Faith close. "Stop it, Ethan." He shrugged, unaffected. "Court's about to see you're a single mom with shaky finances. Meanwhile, I've got plenty of free time to dedicate to my daughter." His smirk was all predatory charm. Before Fiona could respond, Andrew appeared by Mr. Lawson's side. She stiffened. She hadn't realized Andrew would come in person. He wore a black wool coat, jaw set firm. Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Well, well, the millionaire boss swooping in again, huh?" Andrew's tone was cold. "I'm here to ensure Faith's interests are protected." Ethan gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah, keep telling yourself that. I'll see you inside." The man sauntered away, and Fiona's heart hammered. Faith clung to her mother's leg, sensing tension. Andrew turned to them, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" Fiona just nodded curtly. She was grateful, but the swirl of conflicting emotions, pain, anger, lingering affection kept her from meeting his eyes. He seemed to accept that and stepped back, allowing Mr. Lawson to guide Fiona and Faith into the courtroom. The hearing that followed felt like a surreal haze. Ethan's attorney painted Fiona as an overworked single mom, lacking stable finances or family support. They insinuated that Andrew's involvement was a sign of Fiona's dependence on outside help, implying she couldn't manage on her own. Rage simmered in Fiona's veins. She clutched the table edge, forcing herself to remain calm. Mr. Lawson countered with records of her consistent employment, her recent managerial position, and testimony about how she'd cared for Faith alone all these years. Then he unleashed the damning evidence Andrew had gathered. Ethan's sporadic arrests, gambling debts, bar fights, photos, statements, even financial records revealing he was in default on multiple accounts. Ethan's face soured as the judge listened impassively. Fiona watched him squirm, remembering the heartbreak he'd caused. She suppressed a shudder, determined to hold strong. Finally, the judge called Fiona to speak. She rose, palms damp, voice quivering with emotion as she recounted how Ethan vanished when she got pregnant, how she'd raised Faith on minimal income, and how Faith thrived despite the hardships. Her eyes flicked to the courtroom seats, catching Andrew's gaze just once. He offered a small nod of encouragement, shoulders taut. When Fiona finished, the judge turned to Ethan. He looked rattled, glancing at his lawyer for help, but the evidence was stacked against him. After a tense 15 minutes, the judge cleared his throat, passing the verdict. "I find that Miss Campbell has provided a stable, loving environment for her daughter, while Mr. Coleman has shown neither consistent presence nor financial stability. Full custody remains with Miss Campbell. Supervised visitation may be arranged, pending compliance with anger management and proof of steady employment." Relief crashed over Fiona like a tidal wave. She nearly sobbed as she hugged Faith, who squeaked, "Mama, it's okay?" "Yeah, baby," Fiona whispered, tears rolling. "We're okay." Ethan stormed out, curses under his breath. Mr. Lawson patted Fiona's shoulder, murmuring congratulations. She was still trembling when Andrew approached. He wore an expression of profound relief, a slight tremor in his voice as he said, "I'm so happy for you." She inhaled, trying to steady her pounding heart. "We couldn't have won without your help, thank you." Andrew looked at Faith, who clung to Fiona's side, then back at Fiona. "I did it for Faith," he said softly, though the intensity in his gaze hinted it was also for Fiona. For a moment they stood there, the world spinning in a swirl of emotions. It wasn't a perfect resolution to the turmoil between them, but it was a start. Fiona let out a shaky breath, feeling gratitude and maybe the faint spark of something hopeful stir in her chest. "Andrew," she said quietly, I appreciate this. More than I can say." He nodded, eyes raw with sincerity. "I know. And I'm just relieved Faith stays with you, where she belongs." Then Faith unexpectedly threw her little arms around Andrew's legs, looking up with a childish grin. "Thank you for saving us," she said in her small voice. Andrew's face flickered with deep emotion. He gently bent down, hugging her back. "Any time, sweetheart." Fiona watched the scene, tears brimming again. Maybe the rift between them wasn't fully healed. There were still scars from that sense of betrayal, but right now she was simply grateful that Faith was safe. And a tiny part of her recognized that Andrew's willingness to stand by them, despite everything, might be the first step to rebuilding the trust they'd lost. The morning sun broke over Denver's sprawling skyline, casting long shadows across the massive granite pillars outside the family courthouse. Fiona's heart still pounded from the final moments of the custody hearing, her grip on Faith's hand both protective and trembling with relief. She'd just secured their future, no more looming threat of Ethan taking Faith away. But a different kind of tension lingered in the crisp winter air. Andrew stood nearby, the collar of his coat turned up against the cold. The lines around his eyes betrayed fatigue and emotional strain. He'd been quietly watching as Fiona gathered her documents, ushering Faith outside to breathe in the fresh air of victory. Now, with the echo of the judge's gavel still pounding in her mind, she turned to him. "Andrew," she managed, voice catching. "Thank you for everything." He exhaled, releasing a breath he seemed to have been holding since the start of the trial. "You don't have to thank me. I only did what was right for Faith and for you." She studied him for a moment, the swirl of conflicting emotions rising like a wave in her chest. A month ago, she had stormed away from him, convinced that every gesture of kindness was pity. Now, after seeing how he'd fought to protect her child, the bitterness that had once burned so fiercely felt misplaced. But old wounds weren't so easily erased. Faith looked up from where she clutched her stuffed bunny. She blinked at Andrew, then darted forward and hugged his legs, pressing her face against his coat. "Thank you for saving us," she whispered, voice muffled but sincere. Andrew crouched down, returning her hug carefully, as though he feared he might fracture this delicate peace. "You're safe now," he said softly. "That's all that matters." Fiona's vision blurred with tears. A fresh swirl of gratitude and guilt twisted in her stomach. She recalled the day she'd found out about the secret fund, how betrayed she'd felt. Yet here he was, unwavering. Maybe she'd misjudged him, or at least, there was more to the story than her anger had allowed. They lingered on the courthouse steps while people bustled around them, lawyers rushing to their next case, reporters scribbling notes about a separate hearing, security officers ushering folks in and out. The cold wind nipped at Fiona's cheeks, but a slow warmth spread inside her as Andrew straightened. He met her gaze, voice subdued. "Fiona, I never meant to hurt your pride. I never saw you as a charity project. I hope you can believe that now." She swallowed, nodding almost imperceptibly. "It's been hard to separate your intentions from how it all looked, but I see how far you went for us for me. That means something I can't ignore." For a beat, the three of them stood in a small circle, the swirl of downtown chaos drifting past, as if they were in a protective bubble of their own making. Eventually, Faith tugged on Fiona's sleeve. "Mama, can we go celebrate? I want hot cocoa." A shaky laugh escaped Fiona. She ruffled Faith's curls. "Hot cocoa, huh? Seems like a plan." Andrew cleared his throat, stepping closer. "I could drive you, if that's okay, or meet you somewhere for hot chocolate. I'd love to spend time with you both if you'll let me." Memories of their first rides together in his SUV tugged at Fiona's heart. Part of her still hesitated, but Faith's eager grin made the decision. "Yeah," Fiona said softly, "we can do that." A tentative smile curved Andrew's lips. "All right," he said. "Let's go." As they descended those tall courthouse steps, side by side, it felt like the first step toward building something new, a fragile bridge over the troubled waters of their past. The gnawing hostility in Fiona's chest loosened, replaced by the faint glow of a second chance. 3 months later, Fiona found herself standing in front of a different set of stone steps this time, at the entrance to a rustic pavilion perched high in the Rocky Mountains, just an hour outside Denver. The sweeping pine forests and snow-capped peaks made the place feel like a secret wonderland, so unlike the bustling city streets where her life had changed so drastically. The air smelled of cedar and crisp mountain wind. A small cluster of friends and colleagues gathered under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights. Eric was there, looking surprisingly relaxed in a tailored suit, chatting politely with Chloe, who wore a bright sundress under a cozy cardigan. Faith bounded around the edges of the clearing, enthralled by the scattered wildflowers poking through patches of old snow. Heart pounding with anticipation, Fiona smoothed the front of her ivory dress simple, knee-length lace with long sleeves to keep out the lingering chill. She couldn't believe she was about to walk down the short aisle they'd set up, not in a grand cathedral or fancy city venue, but here among the wild pines, under a sky that stretched forever. Andrew waited near the arbor they'd crafted from local branches and fresh greenery. His dark suit contrasted the rustic setting, and yet something about his easy smile, the slight quiver of nerves in his posture, made him fit perfectly into this natural, humble celebration. He caught Fiona's eye from a distance, and a rush of warmth flooded her. She recalled all they'd been through: misunderstandings, heartbreak, legal storms, and realized how impossibly precious this moment was. Soft guitar notes drifted through the air. Faith hurried to her mother's side, holding a small basket of petals. "Mama, can I go first?" she asked, eyes bright. Fiona nodded, murmuring encouragement. She watched Faith trot down the makeshift aisle, scattering pink petals with every step. The guests chuckled and cooed at the sight, snapping photos on their phones. As Fiona followed, her heart soared in time with the music, each footstep over the mountain grass resonating like the final piece of a broken puzzle sliding into place. Reaching Andrew, she tried to keep tears at bay, but emotion glistened in her eyes. He reached for her hand, voice husky with feeling. "I never thought I'd be so thankful for a spilled takeout order," he whispered, the corners of his lips turning upward. A few gentle laughs rippled among the onlookers. The officiant cleared her throat with a kind smile, starting the brief ceremony. The vow exchange was simple, no elaborate speeches, just raw confessions of love and gratitude. At one point, Andrew's voice caught as he admitted, "I've spent years building a business, but I never realized how empty success felt until I nearly lost the chance to share it with someone I truly love." Fiona's chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. She glanced toward Faith, who gave her a huge, gap-toothed grin. "I used to think the best I could do was survive day to day," Fiona said in a trembling voice. "Now I know there's more to life, like building something beautiful with someone who sees me as an equal." With those words, the officiant guided them through the final part. A gentle hush fell. Andrew slid a simple gold band onto Fiona's finger. Then she did the same for him. A beat of stillness, then the officiant announced them married, and applause broke out in that quiet glade. The mountains seemed to echo their cheers. Faith squealed, racing forward to wrap her arms around both of them. Chloe snapped pictures, while Eric dabbed suspicious moisture from the corner of his eye, quickly acting like it was a stray snowflake. The newlyweds laughed, tears and laughter intermingling under the broad Colorado sky. It was small, intimate, and unquestionably perfect. Several weeks after the wedding, Fiona stood in the bright new office space they'd rented near downtown Denver, ironically not too far from Daily Deliver's original headquarters. This time, though, the sign above the door read, "Better Road Foundation," painted in bold lettering beneath it, empowering single parents and drivers. Sunshine poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a handful of desks, a small lounge area, and boxes of pamphlets waiting to be sent to local shelters and driver hubs. Andrew had insisted on something simple and functional rather than extravagant, matching the foundation's mission: practical help for working families who needed it most. Eric, now a strategic partner in the foundation, paced near a board listing their initial programs: car repair grants, childcare vouchers, meal stipends. Next to him, Chloe updated a color-coded timeline for their upcoming launch event. Everywhere Fiona looked, she saw tangible ways they could change lives like her life had once changed when Andrew first offered that consulting role. Andrew emerged from a back room carrying Faith on his shoulders. The little girl held a stack of crayons in one hand, pointing out where new coloring stations should go for families visiting. "We need pictures on those walls," Faith said decisively. "So it's not boring." Fiona smiled. "Noted, boss," she teased. She turned to Andrew, her tone shifting to gentle seriousness. "It's hard to believe this is real. When I was struggling to pay rent and fix my old car, I would have given anything for a program like this." Andrew set Faith down, brushing a speck of dust from his shirt. "I wish we'd started it sooner, but better late than never." He cast his gaze around the open space. "I want it to be a place where no one feels alone. People can come in for real support, not just lip service." Eric cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I've got local press and a handful of potential donors swinging by tomorrow for a soft launch. Chloe and I will handle the presentations, but we'd love to have you, Fiona. Share your story, just a short talk about your journey from driver to manager to founder." Fiona hesitated, memories of old insecurities creeping in. Yet she caught Faith's wide-eyed gaze, brimming with pride. It reminded her of how many single parents might need to hear her voice. "Yeah," she said, summoning a smile. "I'll do it." That night, after the day's hustle, the group parted ways. Fiona stood alone near the windows, looking out at Denver's night skyline. Andrew joined her quietly, slipping an arm around her waist. "Thinking about the future?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Thinking about how just a year ago I was delivering takeout, praying not to run out of gas." She laughed lightly, leaning against him. "Now we're setting up a foundation that could save people from the exact struggles I went through." Andrew pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "I'm proud of you. This foundation, Better Road, is as much yours as it is mine. You're changing so many lives." Her eyes stung with emotion, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that told her she was on the right path. "We're doing it together," she said, voice hushed, "just like we promised." Outside, the city lights glittered like the promise of new beginnings. In that reflection, Fiona saw herself differently now, no longer a frightened single mom on the edge of eviction, but a woman forging a real impact for others. And she wasn't alone. 5 winters later, Denver had grown further, skyscrapers reaching higher, new public transit lines crisscrossing the city. The harsh cold still gripped the region each December, but the spirit of progress thrived. And in a renovated building on the north side, the Better Road Foundation bustled with families and volunteers alike. In a bright main hall, kids played in a supervised corner, their laughter echoing through the open space. Fiona guided a group of new single parents through the steps to apply for the program's car maintenance grants, her eyes glowing with empathy. She'd lived their hardships. Now she was living proof of how far a little support could go. Faith, now 8 years old, was perched on a small stool, reading a storybook to a cluster of younger kids. Her voice carried an infectious excitement, occasionally peppered with imaginative commentary. She reminded Fiona of a fearless guide, leading the next generation to believe in better tomorrows. Andrew entered from a side office, wearing jeans and a casual sweater these days. He'd traded expensive suits for a more approachable style. He strolled over to Fiona, who, at 7 months pregnant, offered a tired but content smile. His eyes sparkled at her rounded belly. "How's our future soccer star treating you today?" he teased gently. Fiona patted her stomach with a wry grin. "Let's just say he's practicing kicking 24/7s. He chuckled, resting a hand on the gentle curve. The closeness was a testament to how far they'd come, a place of genuine warmth and unity, free from the walls of distrust that once divided them. Moments later, Eric walked in, giving them an approving nod. "We've got a reporter from the Denver Chronicle here for an interview," he said. "Wants to feature the Foundation's 5-year mark." Fiona and Andrew exchanged a glance. They'd always been somewhat private about the full details of their personal journey, preferring the spotlight to remain on the families they served, but maybe it was time to share a bit more hope with the world. In a corner of the Foundation's office, the reporter set up a modest camera, while Faith hovered excitedly behind Andrew. The questions flowed. What inspired you to start Better Road? How does it differ from other charities? Where do you see it going next? Andrew answered from the heart, describing how he and Fiona had witnessed the shortcomings in gig economy support and decided to act. Fiona added personal anecdotes of her nights delivering food through snowstorms, struggling to keep her child warm. She credited Andrew for enabling her to transition from driver to consultant, though she also emphasized the power of self-determination and second chances. At one point, the reporter asked, "What would you say to single parents who feel trapped by their circumstances?" Fiona glanced at Andrew, then at Faith, who beamed from the sidelines. "You're stronger than you think," Fiona said quietly, her gaze steady on the camera. "And sometimes, help shows up in unexpected ways like a random job offer or a small fund that covers your broken transmission. Don't be ashamed to accept a hand when it's offered. Real strength is knowing you don't have to do everything alone." Andrew reached for her hand under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. The reporter smiled, sensing the depth of their bond. After the interview wrapped, Faith ran up with her usual bounce. "Mom, Dad," she piped, "can I show them the new mural design? The one with the rainbow and the 3 stick people?" Fiona's heart fluttered at the reminder of that first drawing from years ago, a child's vision of a family. "Of course, sweetie," she said. "Lead the way." Together they walked to the far wall, where a large mural was in progress. It showed a sunrise over the Denver skyline, a winding road through the mountains, and 3 figures, 2 adults and 1 child holding hands under a colorful arc. The caption read, "Love multiplies when it's shared." Andrew slipped an arm around Fiona's waist. "Remember that spilled curry in the hallway?" he murmured, tone full of wonder. She laughed softly, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. "I remember. Hard to believe it sparked all this." He kissed the top of her head. "Best mistake I ever witnessed." In that moment, surrounded by bright artwork, the hum of families receiving aid, and Faith's laughter echoing in the background, Fiona realized that all the pieces of her journey had come together, forging a legacy that went far beyond their own happiness. They were living proof that an unexpected offer, given and received in good faith, could change countless lives. And the road ahead looked brighter than any snowy Denver night she'd once feared. As she rested a hand over her pregnant belly, feeling her son's gentle kicks, Fiona silently thanked the night she'd slipped on that icy sidewalk, the day Andrew had insisted on hearing a driver's truth. Every twist and turn had led here to a place where love, trust, and compassion thrived. And as far as Fiona was concerned, that was the real happily ever after they'd all been searching for.